A-Rod, Manny, Ichiro, Pettit, Sabathia, Carlos Beltran, Jimmy Rollins, Omar Vizquel, King, Felix, Chase, Utley, Billy Wagner, Andrew Jones, Bobby Abreu, Brian McCann, Ian Kinsler, Torrey Hunter, Russell Martin, Mark Burley, Adam Jones, Ben Zobrist, David Wright, Hanley Ramirez, Carlos Gonzalez, Troy Tulowitzki, Dustin Pedroia, Fernando Rodney, Curtis Granderson, Francisco Rodriguez. That's the list.
Hello and welcome to The Case For, a Baseball Hall of Fame podcast. I'm your host, attorney and baseball fan extraordinaire Russell Christian. On each episode of this podcast, I examine a different Major League Baseball player's career, and I'll make the case for whether I believe this player does or does not deserve enshrinement in the National Baseball Hall of Fame Museum in Cooperstown, New York. If you're someone who's ever had a serious, sit-down conversation with your significant other about the amount of baseball hats you own, then this is the podcast for you. Friendly reminder, I've never played professional baseball. I'm just a fan. I'm also an attorney, and believe me when I say it's way more fun to discuss the pros and cons of a player's hall-worthiness than it is to review thousands of pages of medical records in order to create a medical chronology. If you know, you know, and you're probably still scarred. Today's Superfound shout-out, of course, has to go out to the one, the only, the great Dan Bern. Dan is a critically acclaimed singer-songwriter who's penned hundreds of baseball songs, and if you've listened to the episode, you know he was kind enough to take some time recently to sit down with me for an interview, the first interview I've done on this podcast, and you can find that on episode 21, streaming everywhere. Also, Dan wrote the song that you hear at the beginning of this episode and at the beginning and end of my last episode, episode 21, an original song he wrote called The List, which lists out all the players in the 2025 Baseball Writers Association of America ballot. Played a snippet of the song in the beginning, and if you stick around at the end, I'll play the entire song. And it's very relevant for today's discussion because, of course, for our 22nd episode, I'm going to be breaking down the entire 2025 Baseball Writers Association of America ballot, making my predictions for who I think will get in and who won't get in, and also offering my own personal opinions for what they're worth as to who I think should and should not get in. I did an episode like this last year before the 2024 ballot, and some of the players I discuss here today were mentioned on that episode. So if you haven't already, you definitely want to check that episode out. That's episode 12 of my podcast. You can also check out episode 13 of my podcast, where I did my recap of the 2024 ballot and my initial preview of this upcoming 2025 Baseball Writers Association ballot. So I'm going to expand upon that episode here today. We've got plenty of talented and worthy players to get into, so without further ado, let's make the case for the players on the 2025 Baseball Writers Association of America ballot.
That's your 2025 Hall of Fame ballot. I'd give the nod to Ichiro, probably Sabathia, maybe Billy Wagner, possibly Beltran. It's looking like A-Rod and Manny will go the way of Bonds and Clemens. In other words, no.
All right. Thank you again, Dan Bern. Love that song. And in honor of Dan appearing on this podcast and writing the song, I'm going to be going through these players in the order that Dan Bern gave us. And as I go through, one thing I want to point out before I get into each particular player, I'm also going to mention at the beginning when I mention their name, how many years a player has been on the ballot, whether it's their first year or if it's second, third. The player has 10 years to be on the Baseball Writers Association of America ballot. And if any of those years they get 75% or more of the vote, they get in. So when I read off the names, I'm also going to read off, whether or not, how many years they've been on the ballot and what their vote totals were last year. If you follow the Baseball Hall of Fame discussion, the trackers, debates, etc., you know that if a player's been on just a few years and they're trending upwards towards that 75%, it usually bodes well for their Hall of Fame induction. On the flip side, if they're stalling out at a low percentage or even going down, then it's starting to look like they're not going to make the Hall of Fame. So let's start off with A-Rod. He's on this ballot for this is fourth year, 34.8% last year. So he's not trending upwards, and just discussing the elephant in the room, it's because of steroids. He missed all of 2014 for an MLB suspension for his role in the biogenesis scandal. So if PED use is a non-starter for voters, he's not going to get their vote. He also admitted to taking steroids. You can go online, find the interviews and stuff where he talks about that. But for the purposes of just being thorough, I want to look at his stats, his hardware, his fame factor. I'll give him a breakdown. He had a good enough career. Look, PED use aside, your opinions on that aside, he put up a really impressive career. So let's just go through that quickly. Unquestionably, his statistics are not just first ballot Hall of Famer, but without exaggeration, some of the best career statistics in baseball history. He played 22 years, Hit 2,021 runs, that's 8th all-time. 3,115 hits, that's 23rd all-time. 548 doubles, 696 home runs, that's 5th best all-time. 2,086 RBI, 329 stolen bases, career batting average of 295, on base percentage of 380, slugging percentage of 550 for a 930 OPS. He also has a 140 OPS plus. He had 5,813 total bases, that's 7th all-time, and a 117.6 career WAR. It's the 16th best all-time. A-Rod is one of only 4 players in MLB history with 600 home runs and 3,000 hits. That's Hank Aaron, Albert Pujols, Willie Mays, and A-Rod. I mean, that's pretty exclusive company. The only players in MLB history with 600 home runs, 3,000 hits, 2,000 runs, and 2,000 RBI are A-Rod and Hank Aaron. And A-Rod has more stolen bases than Hank Aaron, as well as a higher career on base percentage and OPS than Hank Aaron. And this is the kicker here, just and purely in terms of stats, you can't argue with A-Rod's greatness. He's the only player in MLB history with 600 or more home runs, 3,000 or more hits, 2,000 or more runs, 2,000 or more RBI, and 300 or more stolen bases. Just A-Rod. That's it. So no doubt that based on his stats, he's elite. He's tied with Albert Pujols for the most 100 RBI seasons in MLB history with 14. He's a 3-time MVP, 14-time All-Star, 2-time Gold Glove Award winner, 10-time Silver Slugger, and a 2009 World Series champ. So I've never heard anyone make the argument that there is a statistical argument against A-Rod. So if you'd like to make one, I'd be happy to hear it, but it's just not going to make it. It comes down to steroids. So it's going to be, and if you didn't listen to I keep talking about it, if you didn't listen to the Dan Bern episode, we get into the steroid era a little bit. He's got a song called I Miss the Steroid Era. It's kind of a fun and funny song, but it's a conversation. He made the comment, kind of the joke. He said, I'm not professor of ethics. It's a difficult and it's a murky conversation, and I think it's going to be one of those things that eventually will come to some consensus when we have 10,000 conversations like the one Dan and I had, or that people have in bar rooms and on Twitter, all over America and the world. So, keep talking about it. We'll figure something out someday. And speaking of PEDs, next guy on the list here, Manny Ramirez. I'm going to break down Manny's vote totals. This is his 9th year on the ballot, and last year he had 32.5%. So it's not looking like Manny's ever going to get in, at least on the baseball writers ballot. He might get in once we figure out what the heck to do with the PED crew, but that's probably a long time from now. So, but again, let's go through his career, be thorough here. In 2009, he had a 50-game suspension for PEDs, and he was suspended again in 2011. So, PEDs are a non-starter. He's not getting your vote, and he hasn't gotten a lot of votes, despite great stats, which, for the sake of being thorough, let's walk this through here. He had 1,544 career runs, 2,574 hits, 547 doubles, 555 home runs, 1,831 RBI, career batting average of 312, on base percentage of 411, slugging percentage of 585, and an OPS of 996. He had an incredible 154 OPS plus, 4,826 total bases, yet somehow just a 69.3 BWAR. It's one of the weird head-scratching things about WAR. But anyway, I think on the stats, he's definitely got it. He's part of the famed 500 home run club, which used to be an automatic ticket to Cooperstown, but not anymore, given that so many of the recent players who've attained this milestone have done so with the assistance of PEDs, or at least, suspicions or rumors of PEDs. Nevertheless, these stats are what they are, and among players with 500 or more home runs, Manny has the 4th highest career batting average after Ted Williams, Babe Ruth, and Jimmy Fox. Of those 4 players, Manny has the most career doubles. Manny was an RBI machine, had 12 seasons of 100 or more RBI, which ties him for 3rd best all-time. Pujols and A-Rod, as I mentioned, A-Rod tied at number 1 with 14 seasons. Jimmy Fox, Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth tied for 2nd all-time with 13 seasons. And Manny's tied for 3rd all-time with Miguel Cabrera, Barry Bonds, and Al Simmons with 12 seasons of 100 or more RBI. So there's no doubt that statistically he's a Hall of Famer, but the PED use is just going to keep him out, at least for the indefinite future. In Manny's case, he had not 1 but 2 suspensions, and I think that's probably going to keep him out for a long time, if not forever. We'll see. Briefly, I don't want to get too far into the weeds and PED people, but there's going to be 1,000 of these conversations, and a lot of people do distinguish between players who have actually been busted or admitted as to people who were suspected. So if you're in the camp of, Well, he never failed a drug test. Manny had 2 suspensions, so it's no doubt he took. So that's really the only thing keeping him out, but he certainly had a good career. Let's get into number 3. I wanted to do a whole episode about him as sort of a victory lap, but, there's no doubt he's going to get in. Of course, Ichiro Suzuki. The great Ichiro Suzuki appears on the ballot this year for the first time. He's a no-doubt Hall of Famer, and he may, in fact, go in as a unanimous choice. So I didn't do a full episode because, do you really need to spend an hour debating whether or not he's a Hall of Famer? He is a Hall of Famer, so let's take our victory lap here now, and let's just discuss Ichiro's stats, just for purposes for having some fun and recognizing his greatness. His career stats, 1,420 runs, 3,089 hits, 509 stolen bases. He was a career .311 hitter, had a .355 on base percentage, a .402 slugging percentage, and 3,994 total bases. Ichiro led the league in hits 7 times. He had 10 seasons of 200 or more hits, which ties him for most all-time with Pete Rose. What's interesting is of Ichiro's 10 seasons, they all occurred consecutively. 10 consecutive seasons, 200 or more hits. That's incredible. His 262 hit season in 2004, of course, is the all-time record for hits in a season, breaking George Sisler's record, which at that point when Ichiro broke it, it stood for 84 years. And I won't get into it now, but you can look on the internet, some great stories about Ichiro really paying respect to George Sisler and Sisler's family as he pursued that single-season hit mark. Even visited George Sisler's grave at one point. So that shows Ichiro is a classy guy. Just great baseball moment. So Ichiro was a 2-time batting champ, including a huge .372 average in 2004. Ichiro is one of only 7 players in MLB history with 3,000 hits and 500 stolen bases. The others are the late, great Ricky Henderson, R.I.P. Ricky. We lost you last year. That hurt. Also, Paul Molitor, Lou Brock, Ty Cobb, Honus Wagner, and Eddie Collins. Of those, only Molitor, Cobb, Suzuki, Wagner, and Collins have 3,000 hits, 500 or more stolen bases, and a career batting average of 300 or higher. Ichiro, of course, was a 2001 Rookie of the Year and MVP. He was a 10-time All-Star, 3-time Silver Slugger, 10-time Golden Glover, and the 2007 All-Star Game MVP. Of course, if you remember, he hit the first and only inside-the-park home run in All-Star Game history. It was an incredible moment. Of course, Ichiro accomplished all of this despite not making his MLB debut until he was 27 years old, an age at which some players, let's be frank, are already considered washed up. The reason for this delay, of course, is that another key aspect of the Ichiro story is that he was born and raised in Japan, and he spent first 9 seasons of his career professionally playing in the Nippon Baseball League in Japan, where he was a 7-time All-Star, a career .353 hitter, and 3-time MVP. Of course, although it's not official, it is worth noting that if you combine his career hits from Japan and from Major League Baseball, it totals 4,367 hits, which of course is more than all-time hit king Pete Rose. But it's not fair to do that. The 2 different leagues. And that's important too, because one of the fame factors of Ichiro, although he was not the first Japanese player in Major League Baseball, he was certainly the first Japanese star and superstar until this day. I mean, huge superstar. And it's fair to say that he paved the way for later Japanese stars, of course, the most notable being Shohei Ohtani. So for all these reasons, I think it's a lock that Ichiro gets in the Hall of Fame. And if he doesn't get in unanimously, I'm guessing he's going to get in at least with 97% or more of the vote. Next player on our list is Andy Pettitte. Dan Bern and I talked about Andy a little bit. An editor's note, I was going to put this on Twitter. I mentioned on my episode with Dan that Andy had been suspended for PED use. That's inaccurate, but he did admit to PED use. So I 2 sides of the same coin. But Andy Pettitte was associated with PEDs. So, and for that reason, this is his 7th year on the ballot. And last year he had a 13.5% vote total. So it doesn't look like Andy's going to be getting into the Hall of Fame. I do think, and Dan and I talked about this a little bit, I think on his stats he does have a Hall of Fame resume. Again, setting aside the fact he's named the Mitchell Report, he admitted to taking HGH, but otherwise, in a very stat-wise and excellent case, he's got 256 career wins, 2,448 strikeouts, 3.85 ERA, is a bit high for the Hall of Fame, 3-time All-Star, 2001 ALCS MVP, and 5 top 10 Cy Young Award finishes. Big thing, of course, those Yankees teams, man. 5-time World Series champ with the Yankees. And of course, Pettitte was a big part of those Yankees World Series teams. And you can't mention the fame factor of Andy Pettitte without mentioning that he's the subject of the Dan Bern song Comeback Andy Pettit off his Doubleheader album. If you haven't checked out the album Doubleheader by Dan Bern, you definitely want to check it out. Let's get into our next player on the list, CC Sabathia. He's on the ballot for the first time. I think he's a lock for a first ballot Hall of Famer. 251 wins, 3.74 ERA, a bit high, but 3,093 strikeouts and a career WAR of 62.3. He was a six-time All-Star, 2007 Cy Young Award winner, 2009 ALCS MVP, and won the World Series with the Yankees in 2009. Among eligible players, so not including current players Verlander and Scherzer, Clemens and Schilling are the only other members of the 3,000 strikeout club not in the Hall of Fame. I'm assuming CC's going to get in. So Sabathia, Clemens, and Schilling right now, the only eligible players not in the Hall of Fame who are members of the 3,000 strikeout club. I think CC's going to get in, and if so, that would just leave Clemens and Schilling amongst eligible players that aren't in the Hall of Fame, despite having 3,000 more strikeouts. So 3,000 strikeouts used to be a lock, not so much anymore, but for me it still is, assuming no off-field issues, which really don't have for CC. So I think it's fair to say CC's getting into the Hall of Fame this year. Next player on our list is Carlos Beltran. This is his third year on the ballot. He had 57.1% of the vote last year. I think Carlos is trending upwards. Dan in his song says maybe Beltran this year. I don't know if Carlos gets there this year or not. But I think he's a Hall of Famer. And look, for Carlos and a couple of these other guys, I've already done episodes. I have episode 10 about Carlos Beltran. So just for the sake of time today, I know the vote's coming up soon. You're listening to this. You're kind of cramming in preparation for the vote. I won't do a breakdown of Carlos other than to say, spoiler alert, I think he's a Hall of Famer. So if you're wondering why, go take a listen to episode 10. I break down and make the case for Carlos Beltran. Next on our list is Jimmy Rollins. This is his fourth year on the ballot. Last year, he had 14.8% of the vote. I don't think Rollins will get in, but he's still a good player. 2,455 hits, 1,421 runs, 470 stolen bases, and a career WAR of 47.6. Biggest thing, on his resume is 2007 National League MVP. He won a Silver Slugger. He's a four-time Gold Glove Award winner and three-time All-Star. Of course, won the 2008 World Series with the Phillies. I think Jimmy Rollins is a good player. I don't see him as a Hall of Famer. And Rollins kind of, for me, gets brought into the discussion of Chase Utley for the Hall of Fame because I've said before, I don't even think Chase Utley was the third best player. I think Chase Utley was, the third best player on the Phillies during that time. I think Rollins and Ryan Howard were better players than Chase Utley. So we'll get into Chase Utley in a second. But Rollins, great player, won an MVP. I don't see him as a Hall of Famer. Next up is someone who Dan Bern brought up in our last episode 21, our conversation, Omar Vizquel. His eighth year on the ballot, 17.7% last year. Look, I'll just get into it now. The reason, I think he was already a borderline candidate in some people's minds. I won't get into it, but he's had some off-field issues which have just absolutely derailed his Hall of Fame chances. But if he didn't have those off-the-field issues, I think he would be in the Hall of Fame or would get in eventually. I think on his numbers, I think he's a Hall of Famer. Offensively, he's got 2,877 career hits, so almost 2,900, just short of that, 3,000. He's the all-time leader at shortstop for games played, double plays turned, and fielding percentage. He's third in career putouts at shortstop. So frankly, I think all of that combines for a very excellent Hall of Fame resume. However, as I've mentioned, there's some, serious and some pretty disturbing off-field issues, which I won't get into, but obviously those have given the voters a lot of pause and pretty much have completely derailed his Hall of Fame chances. So because of that, he was already a borderline candidate. I think he certainly has a great body of work offensively and defensively, but I think he's shot himself in the foot proverbially, and I don't see him getting in the Hall of Fame this year or anytime in the immediate future. Next up on our list, Felix Hernandez, King Felix. I'm not going to get into it. Episode 15, I do a full breakdown of King Felix. Go give that a listen if you haven't already. That brings us to the 10th guy on our list, Chase Utley. If you haven't followed me on Twitter or Blue Sky, please do so. If you didn't see it or you weren't part of it, go check out the great Chase Utley debate of 2024. Man, Chase Utley, whew! Chase Utley is like one of the most contentious players. I love the debate. I don't see it. And look, last year, he had 28.8%. I don't see him really getting in, although he's trending high. Episode 9, I break down Chase Utley's case. I'm not going to get into it now. I don't see Chase Utley as a Hall of Famer, but I respect that a lot of people do. Here's the quick elevator pitch, pros and cons of Chase Utley. Counting stats, he doesn't have them. Hardware, he doesn't have them. Basically, the entire case for Chase Utley comes down to WAR and advanced statistics. And from there, it veers off into a lot of eyeball tests and some non-scientific. Look, I get it. You're a Phillies fan. You like Chase Utley. I get it. I like fan favorites, too. I've got my fan favorite Braves. We're going to talk about McCann here in a few. I go into depth about Brian McCann because he's fan favorite. But objectively, I just don't see Chase Utley as a Hall of Famer. Sorry. Next one is Billy Wagner. This is his last year on the ballot. He had 73.8% of the vote last year, so just under that 75% needed. I do a full episode on Billy Wagner. Check it out. It's episode 5. Spoiler alert, I was a little unkind to him because of his postseason performance. I saw him as someone that was a borderline candidate whose postseason performance didn't help the case, so it sort of weighed against him. But re-examining his career, I think his regular season body of work is strong enough to warrant induction to Cooperstown, and I think that he's going to get in this year. Same thing with Andrew Jones. I'm not going to get into it too much. Episode 8, I break down the case for Andrew Jones. This is his 8th year on the ballot, and he's at 61.6%. So he's trending upwards, and I think this year and next year are going to bode well for Andrew. Andrew might get in his last year, but we'll see what happens this year. I think he's a Hall of Famer, and if you want to hear my pros and cons for Andrew, go check out episode 8. Likewise, next guy on the list is Bobby Abreu. This is his 6th year on the ballot at 14.8% of the vote. I don't see Bobby really going anywhere. I don't see him getting on the ballot. I think he's going to be one of these guys that we talk about for the next 30 years as part of the Veterans Committee. I think he's got a really good and impressive Hall of Fame resume. Go listen to episode 11. I make the case for Bobby Abreu. All right, that gets me to one of the players I was really the most excited to talk about on this list this year. That's Brian McCann. I should do a full episode, and I didn't have time this year, but I may do a full episode if he doesn't get in this year, which I don't think he's going to get in this year. And the big question is whether or not he's going to get enough votes to stay on the ballot. I hope he does, because Brian is a tough one for me. Obviously, if you listen to the podcast or you follow me on social media, you know I'm a huge Braves fan. So Brian McCann's recent. Brian McCann was a fan favorite. I loved watching Brian McCann. I remember following him, from the beginning of his career like it was yesterday. Brian got his start as a Brave, and within a few seasons really established himself as a leader, both offensively, defensively, as a catcher, and as a clubhouse leader. I always saw Brian as someone that was on kind of a Hall of Fame trajectory, and as sad as I was to see him leave the Braves and sign with the Yankees, I remember thinking at the time, hey, good for him. It's every kid's dream to grow up and play for the Yankees, so hey, do your best, Brian, put up some great years and build yourself a Cooperstown resume. But before we get into the Yankees period, let's focus on the highlight of McCann's career. Of course, those are his first 9 years with the Braves between 2005 and 2013. Braves fans will probably remember Brian McCann as one of the baby Braves in 2005. The Braves had a ton of young rookie talent, most notably McCann and Jeff Francoeur. Braves ended up winning the NL East that season, thanks in part to a lot of these rookies. And although he only played in 59 games that year, McCann hit a respectable .278 with 5 home runs. More importantly, he established himself early as a good defensive catcher. There's some great stories out there about McCann learning the ropes from Hall of Famer John Smoltz. And there's one I've heard that about McCann, in one of his first games catching Smoltz, doing a great job. And then after the game, Smoltz made a comment to Bobby Cox, one of the coaches, saying, hey, make sure that catcher's in the lineup for my next game. So that kind of cemented his spot on the Braves from there on out. So 2006 will be McCann's breakout year offensively. He hit .333 in 130 games, so he didn't have enough at-bats to qualify for the batting title, but he almost did, and had he qualified, his .333 average would have been the third best in the NL that year, behind batting champion Freddie Sanchez at .344 and Miguel Cabrera at .339 back when he was on the Marlins. Remember that year was the same year that Joe Mauer won the AL batting title. So I remember like it was yesterday. There's a really cool storyline going on that year that there's a chance that catchers might win the batting titles in both leagues. that would have been really cool. I really wish that had happened, but it didn't happen. Maurer ended up winning the batting title. McCann still had a very respectable 333. Didn't qualify for the batting title. Didn't have enough at-bats, but certainly had a great season. In addition to that batting average, he also hit 24 home runs and drove in 93 runs that year. Between 2007 and 2013, McCann would average 21 home runs, 78 RBI, and a 269 batting average each of those 7 seasons, in addition to playing the catcher position well. Now, if you look at his defensive stats, he did lead the league in errors twice, but he also led the National League in putouts in 2010. And twice he led the National League in double plays turned at catcher. And in 2012, he even led the National League in my favorite statistic of all time, fielding percentage. He also led the National League once and caught stealing and twice in range factor per game while he was with the Braves. It's for all of these reasons, offensively and defensively, that the Yankees signed Bryan to a 5-year deal in 2013. And again, it looked at the time like this was going to be, the possible ride-off into the sunset of a Hall of Fame career. Unfortunately for Bryan and for baseball, that 5-year deal he signed with the Yankees didn't really turn out to be this proverbial ride into the sunset we thought it'd be. And I remember thinking at the time, the next 5 years of the Yankees is going to make or break his Hall of Fame chances. And in retrospect, it kind of broke them. Also, too, in retrospect, what were the Yankees thinking? Objectively, I'm sorry, but signing a catcher who had already been in the league 9 years to a 5-year deal, I'm not sure that makes a lot of business sense on paper, but, whatever. His batting average the first 2 seasons in New York was exactly .232 each season. And again, I know batting average isn't the benchmark anymore, but for a player who had put up really good offensive stats, not just for a catcher, but just good offensive stats and threatened a batting title early in the season, 232 each season was certainly not what the Yankees expected. But he did put up some good power numbers. He had 23 home runs in 2014 and then had a career high to 26 in 2015 and then 20 home runs in 2016. But Bryan really started to struggle defensively in 2016 to the point where the Yankees had to bring up rookie catcher Gary Sanchez. And when Sanchez started playing well, they moved McCann to designated hitter, effectively ending his catching career with the Yankees. Now, with their catcher of the future in Sanchez, the Yankees just didn't see McCann's offensive production as good enough to merit being their DH. So after the 2016, they traded McCann to the Houston Astros, where he would play 2 seasons in 2017, 2018, of course, collect his one and only World Series ring with the infamous 2017 Astros, the trash can Astros. Bryan hit a respectable 18 home runs with 62 RBI in 2017, but batted only .241 and played only 97 games. In 2018, he played only 63 games and hit only .212 with 7 home runs. And after the season, McCann became a free agent, whereupon he made his farewell return to the Braves before the 2019 season for a 1-year contract. In 85 games that year, he hit .249 with 12 home runs and 45 RBI. After the Braves lost to the Cardinals 13-1 in the disastrous Game 5 of the 2019 NLDS, the game of which we as Braves fans never discuss, Bryan decided to hang up the spikes. Defensively for his career, Bryan's just one of 6 catchers in MLB history to record 12,000 or more putouts. He's 6th all-time in putouts for catchers, just ahead of Hall of Famer Gary Carter. McCann also has more career putouts at catcher than Hall of Famers Carlton Fisk, Mike Piazza, and Johnny Bench. He has very respectable career ranks defensively at catcher. His 1,612 games played is 24th all-time. Total zone runs, he's 48th all-time. His range factor per 9 innings, he's 25th all-time. Range factor per game, he's 22nd all-time. Fielding percentage, he's 55th all-time. And offensively, Bryan finished his career with 742 runs, 1,590 hits, 294 doubles, 282 home runs, 1,018 RBI, and a career slash line of .262, .337, 452. He had a .789 OPS, 2,740 total bases, and a career WAR of 32, which doesn't really get him in the Hall of Fame discussion in terms of the analytics. He's a World Series champion 2017, but again, kind of tarnished. It's the trash can Astros, so we're starting to see him and Beltran. We're going to see some more players in the future coming on the ballot. I don't think that's going to impact him as much as it does in the short term. He did get a ring. That's good for him. Big thing for Bryan McCann is a 7-time All-Star and a 6-time Silver Slugger. 2010 All-Star Game MVP. He had a double in that game and three RBI, en route to a 3-1 win over the American League. So drove in all the runs for the National League in that game. He was 2010 All-Star Game MVP. If I were giving the elevator pitch for McCann, I'd say, hey, he's a top 10 all-time catchers in both home runs and putouts. And a 7-time All-Star, still 6-time Silver Slugger, which is the third most all-time Silver Sluggers for a catcher. World Series champ, All-Star Game MVP. Great elevator pitch, great career, but unfortunately, as much as I'm a fan of McCann and as much as I followed his career intently thinking, oh man, I really hope he gets into the Hall of Fame, I think he falls just short of the Hall. I remember, again, following his career season by season on Baseball Reference and thinking, oh man, he's like one good season or a few good stats away. I think another solid year or two in New York and maybe he gets in, or maybe an alternate timeline where he stays with the Braves his whole career and somehow sticks around long enough to, pick up a ring in 2021. That would change things. But these are huge what ifs. We can't really play the what if game. We just got to look at his career as it was. And as it was, again, I think McCann, a great player. Really loved watching him. Always, to me, was on the cusp of a Hall of Fame career, but never really pushed it to the other side. Again, he was like threatening a batting title, but didn't get there. He was getting close, signed with the Yankees, kind of had some down years. So there was a lot of near misses and what ifs in Brian McCann's career. But to me, sorry, Brian, he's close, but no cigar. Again, the elevator pitch, top 10 all time for catchers in both home runs and putouts, extremely impressive. 7-time All-Star, 6-time Silver Slugger, World Series champ, All-Star Game MVP. Certainly an incredible career and certainly a good enough Hall of Fame resume. I hope he's not a one and done. I hope he gets some votes so we can at least keep him in the conversation. And if that happens and he's still on the ballot next year, I'll do a deeper dive and we'll do an episode about Brian. Next on our list is Ian Kinsler. Second baseman Ian Kinsler had a shorter career, only played 14 seasons, most notably his first 8 with the Texas Rangers. He also played 4 seasons with the Detroit Tigers before having stints with the Angels, Red Sox, and Padres at the end of his career. Unfortunately for Kinsler, he finished his career with 1,999 hits, which just checks all of my OCD boxes in the worst ways. I just would have loved to have seen him get a clean turnover of the miles on the mileage on your car, with the 2000th hit. But I'm sure nobody regrets not getting that last hit more than Ian. So it is what it is, still just under 2,000. That's a great career. Also finished his career with 1,243 runs, 416 doubles, 257 home runs, 909 RBI, and career batting average of 269. Career WAR of 54.1. He was a 4-time All-Star, 2-time Golden Glove Award winner. Won the 2018 World Series with the Red Sox. He had a monster ALDS that season, but hit only 182 in the ALCS and 100 in the World Series. Elevator pitch for Kinsler. He had 2 30-30 seasons, one of only 16 players in MLB history to do so. He was also one of 6 players in MLB history to get 6 hits in a game while hitting for a cycle. For me, that's a cool achievement, but honestly, single game records or even single season records aren't as big a deal for the Hall of Fame, which is more of a career stats kind of analysis. So I'll just keep this short and say Kinsler had a great career, good defensive player at a premium infield position, solid offensive production, but in my book, just not a Hall of Famer. Next on our list is Torrey Hunter. It's his 5th year on the ballot. He had 7.3%, so just barely clinging on. He had a very good and long 19-year career, mostly with the Twins and Angels. Also spent 2 years on the Tigers. His first full season was 1999. He played 139 games in his last season of 2015. And during that span, he never really had a bad season. He had a career WAR of 50.7, 277 hitter, 353 home runs, 2,452 hits, 1,296 runs, 1,391 RBI, 195 stolen bases, 4,087 total bases. He was a 5-time All-Star, 2-time Silver Slugger, 9-time Golden Glover. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but man, these are really, really good career numbers. And almost like, either he's in or he's not, but I almost feel like those numbers are worth more than 7.3% of the vote. But, very good player, but didn't really check a lot of, career counting stat boxes. So no disrespect to Torrey. I just don't think he's going to get in the Hall of Fame. Next up on our list is Russell Martin. Russell's on the ballot this year for the first time. He was a catcher. He had a 14-year career with the Dodgers, Yankees, Pirates, and Blue Jays, but he's mostly associated with the Dodgers. He played his first 5 seasons there, then his final season in 2019. His career offensive stats just really don't hit the mark in terms of the Hall of Fame, even for a catcher. 803 runs, 1,416 hits, 191 home runs, 771 RBI, 101 stolen bases, career batting average of 248, and a 38.8 WAR. He was a four-time All-Star, won a Silver Slugger and a Golden Glove, finished ninth in the Rookie of the Year voting in 2006, and got MVP votes in 3 seasons. His highest finish was 13th in 2014. In 58 postseason games, he batted 191 with 6 home runs, which for me doesn't really... 6 home runs is good, but 191 average, not so much. So, look, no disrespect, Russell Martin, kind of a fan favorite, good catcher, had a little pop in his bat, but I don't see him as a Hall of Famer. Next up is Mark Buehrle. We talked about Mark last time. This is his 5th year on the ballot. 8.3% of the vote last year. I don't think Mark is going to get in, at least on the baseball writers ballot. Workhorse pitcher. He pitched 200 or more innings 14 straight years. Almost 15. He pitched 198.2 innings in 2015. I said this on my last year's episode about Mark. By comparison, Jacob deGrom has only pitched 200 or more innings 3 times and hasn't pitched more than 100 since 2019. So not really picking on deGrom, but just because he's kind of considered one of the best pitchers right now when he's healthy. It's just worth comparing to show how much of a workhorse Mark Buehrle was. Had a career record of 214 wins, 160 losses. ERA is a bit high, 381. But here's the knock. I mentioned this last time. With all those innings, he has less than 2,000 strikeouts. He has 1,870 strikeouts. So you think, man, all those innings pitched, if he probably should be getting more strikeouts. But anyway, 5-time All-Star, 4-time Gold Glove, won the 2005 World Series with the White Sox. I like Buehrle. I think he's a great pitcher, threw a perfect game. So great resume, great career. I don't see him as a Hall of Famer. Next up is Adam Jones. Adam's on the ballot for the first time this year. Had a 14-year career, 11 of them with the Orioles. As a center fielder, very respectable career numbers. Good player. I just don't think they're Hall of Fame numbers. Had just under 1,000 runs, 963 runs, 1,939 hits, 282 home runs, 945 RBI, 277 career batting average, 3,179 total bases, and 32.6 WAR. He had 7 seasons of 25 or more home runs, 8 seasons of 70 or more RBI. He's a 5-time All-Star, 4-time Gold Glove Award winner, 1-time Silver Slugger. Good player, but I don't see him getting in the Hall of Fame. Same with Ben Zobrist, next on our list. Ben was a utility player, played various positions in his career, including shortstop, all 3 outfield positions, third base, second base, first base, and he even got 1 inning pitching. 884 runs, 1,566 hits, 167 home runs, 768 RBI, career 266 batting average, 44.5 WAR. 3-time All-Star, won a World Series in 2015 with the Royals, and then in 2016 with the Cubs, which is the biggest feather in his Hall of Fame cap and highlight of his career, probably. Zobrist, of course, was the 2016 World Series MVP for the curse-breaking Cubs. Great player and, great part of Cubs lore, but I don't see him as a Hall of Fame. Next one is David Wright. This is David's 2nd year on the ballot. He only got 6.2% of the vote last year, and I don't think he's going to be getting a lot more. And this is kind of bittersweet, especially for Mets fans. He's a sentimental favorite. I mean, it's fair to say he's the face of the Mets franchise in the 21st century. He played his entire 14-year career with the Mets, 2004 to 2018. And he holds the Mets franchise record for career WAR, offensive WAR, at-bats, plate appearances, runs, hits, total bases, doubles, RBI, walks, singles, extra base hits, and sac flies, as well as numerous advanced sabermetric categories as well. He was a 7-time All-Star, 2-time Gold Glove winner, 2-time Silver Slugger, just a great offensive and defensive third baseman, career 296 hitter, but injuries cut his career short, and his counting stats, as a result, don't really meet the Hall of Fame criteria. Under 2,000 hits, 242 home runs, 970 RBI, so under 1,000 RBI, 196 stolen bases. Another point, he led all of Major League Baseball in sac flies in 2008 and 2010, but otherwise never led the league in any offensive category. So I think if we're going to give David Wright sort of the Sandy Koufax or the Kirby Puckett treatment, for a shorter career, there needs to be a short but extremely dominant career. And as good as he was, I don't think he was a dominant player. So it's a bit sad. Wright was someone who, while they played, kind of like McCann, I thought, he's on sort of a Hall of Fame trajectory, but eventually sort of fell short. And, it was nice that he didn't get one and done last year, but I don't see him getting into Cooperstown anytime soon. Next up is Hanley Ramirez. Hanley was a utility infielder who spent parts of 15 seasons at shortstop, first base, and third base. Had some respectable career stats: 1,049 runs, 1,834 hits, 375 doubles, 271 home runs, 917 RBI, and a career batting average of 289. Career WAR 38. It's not going to get him in the Hall of Fame in that WAR. I don't think any of those counting stats are going to get him in the Hall of Fame, but nevertheless, he had a good career. He won the 2009 National League batting title with a 342 average. He led all of Major League Baseball in runs scored in 2008 with 125. He was also the 2006 National League Rookie of the Year, a 3-time All-Star, and a 2-time Silver Slugger. Look, he was a good player and his fan favorite. One of my friends here in Vegas is a Marlins fan, and an avid baseball card collector. And still to this day, Hanley Ramirez is his favorite player. So shout out to Jeff Wang. If you're in Las Vegas, go check out his restaurant, Taverna Costera, down in the Arts District. It's an awesome restaurant and bar. They have live music. It's a great place. And if you're into books, check out Jeff's book on Amazon. It's called Modern Baseball Card Investor. So shout out to Jeff. Always enjoy chatting with you, buddy. Love your restaurant and book, but sorry, no offense. In my book, Hanley's not a Hall of Famer. Next up here is Carlos Gonzalez. Well, Carlos definitely gets in the nickname Hall of Fame on the first ballot. Cargo, just great phonetic nickname here. Cargo spent 12 years as an outfielder, most notably 10 seasons with the Colorado Rockies, where he had his most Hall-worthy season in 2010, leading all of Major League Baseball in total bases with 351, and leading the National League in hits, 197, and batting average, 336, to go along with 111 runs, 34 doubles, 34 home runs, 117 RBI, 26 stolen bases, and a 5.9 WAR for a third-place finish in the National League MVP race that year. The only season in which Cargo would receive MVP votes. He would finish his career with 821 runs, 1,432 hits, 302 doubles, 234 home runs, 785 RBI, 122 stolen bases, career 285 batting average, and 24.4 WAR. Respectable stats, and he had that one great season, but don't think that's going to get him in the Hall of Fame. He was also 3-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glove Award winner, 2-time Silver Slugger, also a great postseason player. In 9 postseason games, he hit .412 with 1 home run and 2 RBI, most notably in the 2009 NLDS against Philadelphia. Cargo batted .588 with 15 total bases, 5 runs, 10 hits, 2 doubles, a home run, an RBI, and 2 stolen bases for a gargantuan 1.514 OPS. So, unfortunately for Cargo and the Rockies, the Phils took that series 3-1. Otherwise, Cargo certainly would have walked away with the NLDS MVP. And, that kind of hot streak in October, there's no telling what he could have done in the World Series, but the baseball gods can be cruel sometimes, so we never got to see a red-hot Cargo in the World Series. And as far as his overall career and Hall of Fame case, good player who had one monster season, but otherwise I don't see him as a Hall of Famer. Same with one of Cargo's Rockies teammates, Troy Tulowitzki, up next on the list. Shortstop, who played 10 out of his 13 seasons with the Rockies. Tulo also had a great nickname. Tulo was a very good all-around shortstop. He played well when he was healthy, but the knock on Tulo is that he's hurt a lot. He only had 3 seasons in which he played 140 games or more. He still managed to have some very good offensive seasons and defensive seasons, including 4 seasons batting over 300. It's 7 seasons with 20 or more home runs, 2 seasons with 100 or more runs, and 5 seasons with 80 or more RBI. Defensively, he led all of Major League Baseball in putouts, assists, double play, fielding percentage, and several range factor categories in 2007. He'd eventually lead the league in double plays turned 3 times, and 5 times in his career he led in range factor per 9 games. 4 times in his career he led in range factor per game. Thanks largely to his excellent fielding and positional adjustments, Tulo retired with a very respectable 44.5 WAR. For comparison's sake, Umar Vizquel, who has a much better overall career, I think offensive and defensive numbers in terms of the counting stats, has a career WAR of 45.6, just 1.1 points higher than Tulo. Tulo's career WAR is actually higher than Hall of Fame shortstops Travis Jackson, Rabbit Marinville, and Phil Rizzuto, and higher than current shortstop Carlos Correa and 2000s Red Sox superstar shortstop Nomar Garciaparra. Apart from the WAR, however, Tulo's counting stats just really don't place him in Cooperstown, and his other than his impressive 290 batting average. It's impressive, but that's not going to get him into Cooperstown. And the WAR, very good, very respectable, especially for a shorter career. Still doesn't hit that sort of 70-75 sweet spot. And his counting stats just aren't going to get the cut in terms of Cooperstown. 762 runs, 1,391 hits, 225 home runs, 780 RBI, 361 on base percentage, a 495 slugging, and an 856 OPS. So overall, good player. Gets a bump in the Hall of Fame conversation due to his excellent fielding at the shortstop position, which helps bump his advanced stats and his WAR. But even with those stats, I just don't think he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Same with Dustin Pedroia. Now, Pedroia is next on the list. Similar to Brian McCann, he's a player who appeared to be on a Hall of Fame trajectory. Pedroia, Wright, McCann, these are interesting candidates. Ultimately, Pedroia's Hall of Fame case fell short, I think, because he had a shorter career. I think it's fair to say he had a much better potential Hall of Fame case than McCann or Wright early in his career, most notably, because he won the 2007 Rookie of the Year award and then the 2008 AL MVP award. We talked about this in my Dick Allen episode. There's not a lot of players who have won both a Rookie of the Year and an MVP. It's pretty elite company and mostly Hall of Famers, so I know that's kind of an arbitrary classification, but still, I mean, it's a hell of a way to start your career. So he was definitely on, a great trajectory. Rookie of the Year, Hall of Fame, right out of the gate. And then he also won 2 World Series with the Red Sox in 2007, 2013. So, based on all that, it's like, okay, you've got my attention, Dustin Pedroia. Let's hear what else, makes up your Hall of Fame case. He played premium defense at second base. 3 times he led the league in fielding percentage, as well as total zone fielding runs above average. He led the American League in runs twice and had 4 seasons with 100 or more runs. He led all of Major League Baseball in hits and doubles during his MVP campaign in 2008 to go along with a .326 batting average, 17 home runs, 83 RBI, 20 stolen bases, and a 7 WAR. Dustin had 5 seasons with 185 or more hits, including 2 seasons over 200 hits. He had 5 seasons with a batting average over 300 and 6 seasons with a WAR of 5 or higher. He was a 4-time All-Star and a Gold Glove winner and a Silver Slugger winner. Pedroia retired with an impressive career WAR of 51.9, higher than several Hall of Fame second basemen, including Bobby Doerr, Nellie Fox, Johnny Evers, Tony Lazzari, and Bill Mazeroski. If you're following along so far, you're probably thinking, okay, wow, this sounds like a pretty impressive Hall of Fame resume so far. It certainly was, but the big issue with Pedroia and his Hall of Fame case is that he really didn't play that long. Hall of Fame candidacy requires 10 years, and while Dustin played 14 seasons in Major League Baseball, 5 of those seasons were less than 100 games, including 2018-2019, where Dustin played only 3 and 6 games, respectively. He had only 5 seasons where he played 150 or more games, and only 8 seasons of 130 games or more. As a result, his counting stats are the biggest knock against his Hall of Fame candidacy. He retired with 922 runs, 1,805 hits, 394 doubles, 725 RBI, career .299 batting average, and 805 OPS. And so for these reasons, I think Dustin is a great player who is certainly on a Hall of Fame trajectory, but ultimately had a much shorter career, nevertheless a memorable career. I don't see him as a Hall of Famer just because he didn't get some of the career marks. But if you're someone that's a big Hall guy that likes short peaks, I could see the argument for Pedroia. He's got the hardware. He's got Rookie of the Year. He's the MVP. He's got 2 rings. And when he was healthy and when he was playing, he was definitely an elite player. So, I'm sort of a smaller Hall guy, and I do like to look at both. To me, it's kind of a mixture. I like to look at the career counting stats, and then see, did you have a peak, and how good was that peak? Dustin definitely had the white hot burning peak, but then he just didn't really hit the career marks. So for me, I think because of the counting stats, I put him in the similar category as Chase Utley. I know there's a lot of people that out there that like Chase Utley. They both played second base. They both had really good peaks, but kind of shorter peaks and didn't hit a lot of career counting stats. And I think if you were going to look at the peak of Pedroia and the peak of Utley, I think Pedroia had a better peak, more rings, more hardware. So I don't see either of them as Hall of Famers, though, unfortunately. Next up is Fernando Rodney. Fernando was a lot. I loved watching Fernando Rodney pitch. He was just a hell of a lot of fun to watch pitch during his prime. Great pitcher with his trademark sideways cap, which he wore as a tribute to his dad. Apparently his dad was a fisherman and wore his hat that way. So he wore it as a tribute to his dad. I think that's really cool. My dad's gone. I miss my dad, but I kind of got into baseball because of my dad and my mom. So that's a really cool thing to do. He also had his little trademark arrow shooting celebration he'd do when he recorded a save. That was fun to watch, and he was a good pitcher. So for all these reasons, I really enjoyed watching Fernando Rodney pitch. Every time I was watching a game and he'd come out to close it, I was like, oh yeah, Fernando Rodney, all right. So I'm all in favor of adding a little fun to the game, and Rodney definitely brought that. But he was also a really good closer. He had a long career. He pitched for 11 teams over the course of 17 seasons. He appeared in 951 games. That's the 20th best all-time for a pitcher. And he recorded 327 saves. That's 19th best all-time, including an MLB high 48 in 2014. He also recorded 943 strikeouts and 933 innings pitched for a very impressive 9.1 strikeouts per 9-inning rate. Rodney was a 3-time All-Star and won a World Series with the Nationals in 2019 at the age of 42. Although he wasn't really much of a factor in that series, he gave up 2 hits and 6 walks in 2 innings to go along with a 9 ERA that series. For his career in 20 postseason games, over 6 seasons, Rodney had a postseason ERA of 5.71 and failed to ever record a save in the postseason. So, as it stands, Rodney, he was a fun guy to watch pitch, and during the regular season was a good relief pitcher. But unfortunately, he didn't do well in the postseason, which, as you know, is kind of a knock in my book. Conversely, players who excel in the postseason, get a bump in their Hall of Fame candidacy. But for Rodney, and honestly Wagner, I think postseason performance matters. And in Rodney's case, he's already much more of a borderline candidate, far more of a borderline candidate than Wagner. Wagner, I think, has a regular season argument to get in. But Rodney's a regular season, borderline candidate. And, the fact that he didn't do well at all in the postseason just tips the scale against his induction in my book. So, Rodney, I liked watching you pitch. You had a lot of good, exciting moments in baseball. You were fun to watch. He's got a lot of saves. And again, 20th best all-time in games pitched for pitchers and 19th best all-time for saves. But I don't think those are going to quite get him in the Hall of Fame. To be fair, if you look at the career save leaders, there's a lot of people with more career saves than Rodney who aren't in the Hall of Fame and probably won't get in the Hall of Fame. So, exciting pitcher, good regular season reliever. If you were a general manager trying to pick someone up in their prime, Rodney would have been a good pickup to get in your bullpen, but I don't think he's going to get into the Hall of Fame. Next up is Curtis Granderson. Outfielder Curtis Granderson played 16 years with 7 teams, amassing a career WAR of 47.2 to go along with a career batting average of 249, which in my book, frankly, in the books of a lot of other voters, is a non-starter for me. I know I know batting average is kind of out of vogue in terms of the benchmark for measuring players, but 249 batting average in the Hall of Fame. Look, if he had like 650 home runs or something, that's one thing. Because I know Harmon Killebrew's career batting average, I want to say it's like 253 or something like that. Don't quote me on that. I don't have it in front of me. But Harmon Killebrew had a low batting average, but he led the league in home runs numerous times, had over 500 home runs. So it's like, okay, he's a slugger. He strikes out a lot. That's the knock. Reggie Jackson is a career leader in strikeouts. Dale Murphy had a lower career batting average, but I think he has the other stats to back it up. So career batting average is 249, but without any other impressive counting stats to go along with it. It's just kind of a non-starter for me. Nevertheless, Curtis was a very good player. He had 4 seasons of 100 or more runs, including an MLB leading 136 in 2011. It's interesting, too. He had 3 seasons with 10 or more triples, including an MLB leading 23 triples in 2007. That was the most triples in a season since 1949 and tied with the highest single-season total since the end of the dead ball era. So that's pretty cool. Triples are fun. I like triples. He has 6 seasons of 25 or more home runs, including 2 seasons over 40 home runs. He also led the American League in RBI in 2011, a year in which he finished 4th in the American League MVP voting. He finished his career with 1,217 runs, 1,800 hits, 344 home runs, 937 RBI, and then that career 249 batting average, as we said. He did have a 337 on base percentage and a 465 slugging, but I don't think either of those are going to help his case. And neither does his career WAR of 47.2. It's very good, and yeah, we can cherry pick players historically that are in the Hall of Fame that have lower career WARs, but I don't think if he had 100 WAR or something, that'd be a little bit different. I don't think any of those stats are going to get in the Hall of Fame. Neither is the hardware. I mean, he was a 3-time All-Star, Silver Slugger, and this is important. He's a recipient of the Roberto Clemente Award. Curtis does a lot of great work off the field, has for a while, so that's awesome, and we want to definitely recognize that. All that being said, I think look, he's a good player, great speed and bat in his prime, but his career numbers, his hardware, just fall short for me. And again, while I know batting average is sort of out of vogue in terms of player assessment, still, it's a hard stat to just dismiss outright. And, without a huge amount of, home runs or some other stat to really, kind of counteract or counterweight that low batting average, I don't see him as a Hall of Famer, and he wouldn't get my vote. But nevertheless, a good player. And that brings us to the last player on our list. We're almost done here. Francisco Rodriguez, K-Rod. It's the third year of the ballot. He had 7.8% of the vote last year. He's kind of like Omar Vizquel. He's got some off-field issues, which I won't get into here. You can look him up, but I think it's fair to say they've probably derailed his Hall of Fame chances. Otherwise, I gotta say, on paper, he does have a good Hall of Fame case. He's a relief pitcher, 6-time All-Star, 2002 World Series champion with the Angels, 2-time winner of the now defunct Rolaids Relief Award for the best reliever. He led the league in saves 3 times and holds the single-season save record with 62 in 2008. His 437 saves are 4th best all-time, behind Hall of Famers Mariano Rivera, Trevor Hoffman, and Lee Smith. So there's lots to unpack here. And again, I mentioned this before, probably needs his own episode, but I don't see him, getting on the ballot this year because of some of the off-field issues. But nevertheless, I mean, 4th time, the 4th highest career save total and the single season save record. He's certainly someone that I don't think you can just dismiss outright. He's worth a conversation, and I don't want to get into the off-field issues, but I think they've derailed his chances. So anyway, that's a wrap of my discussion on the 2025 Baseball Writers Association American Ballot. And again, big thanks to Dan Bern for writing that song, The List, which I played a snippet of at the beginning of this episode, and I'm going to play it again here in full so you can hear it. It's just a great song, and I followed the order of the players on his list for my episodes. Again, thank you so much, Dan. If you like Dan Bern, check out his music at danbern.com, and he's on a tour of the East Coast right now, so check that out. All my fans in Braves country, he's going to be playing at Eddie's Attic in Atlanta on January 22nd, so definitely check that out. And that's just the day after the Baseball Writers Association American Ballot announcement. It's going to be Tuesday, January 21st. And after that, I'm going to be doing my next episode, which of course is my breakdown episode where we talk about who got voted in, what the voting totals were, and what I think is going to happen for next year. But until then, remember, when life gets you down, stop what you're doing and watch a baseball game or listen to this song about baseball.
A-Rod, Manny, Ichiro, Pettit, Sabathia, Carlos Beltran, Jimmy Rollins, Omar Vizquel, King, Felix, Chase, Utley, Billy Wagner, Andrew Jones, Bobby Abreu, Brian McCann, Ian Kinsler, Torrey Hunter, Russell Martin, Mark Burley, Adam Jones, Ben Zobrist, David Wright, Hanley Ramirez, Carlos Gonzalez, Troy Tulowitzki, Dustin Pedroia, Fernando Rodney, Curtis Granderson, Francisco Rodriguez. That's the list. That's your 2025 Hall of Fame ballot. I'd give the nod to Ichiro, probably Sabathia, maybe Billy Wagner, possibly Beltran. It's looking like A-Rod and Manny will go the way of Bonds and Clemens. In other words, no. The rest of them were fabulous players, but they got as much chance of getting in the Hall as me. A-Rod, Manny, Ichiro, Pettit, Sabathia, Carlos Beltran, Jimmy Rollins, Omar Vizquel, King, Felix, Chase, Utley, Billy Wagner, Andrew Jones, Bobby Abreu, Brian McCann, Ian Kinsler, Torrey Hunter, Russell Martin, Mark Burley, Adam Jones, Ben Zobrist, David Wright, Hanley Ramirez, Carlos Gonzalez, Troy Tulowitzki, Dustin Pedroia, Fernando Rodney, Curtis Granderson, Francisco Rodriguez. That's the list.